Hello, this is Georgina Rose, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time surfer of the aethers, and welcome back to the Darling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss a variety of things, including esotericism, religion, mysticism, culture, and of course, everything on the fringe of esoterica. And in this video, as part of my Occult 101 series, the flagship series on this channel that has been running for over 3 years now, I discuss beginner introductions to broad esoteric topics so that people can get a little bit of information and then dive into further research on the topic that I'm discussing. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about something kind of broad, but I'll be approaching it with different angles, and that would be love and the idea of love magic. This has been on my brain a lot recently because, as I posted on some other social media, I got engaged. Very exciting. But you know, it got me thinking about love. And when I was learning esotericism for the first time, I sort of approached it through Western esotericism. As you guys know, one of the key concepts in the theme was agape and love. And it was argued that love is one of the key building blocks of the metaphysical universe, which is a theme that recurs repeatedly throughout many esoteric traditions. So why? What does love have to do with anything? Why is this relevant to mysticism? I think we think of love as sort of something that is just a relationship with another person, right? A sort of set of feelings. But that is not true. Love has a deep esoteric dimension, and there are many ways that love shapes our growth as spiritual people and how esotericism infects our relationships. And there are ways to get you relationships using magical practices, which I think a lot of people are always very, very curious about. And that one does raise some ethical questions, but I'll get into that in a bit. So when we talk about sort of the way the universe is constructed, we are largely talking about a series of emanations coming down. And basically what happens is it starts with this point in the circle, the beginning of everything. And it emanates down through a number of spheres and sort of layers of existence, right? And they exist through these sort of polarities, these triads. So you'll have the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and then when they come together, it creates that unification, which then creates the metaphysical child. A lot of ritual formula is essentially built upon this concept. It's often called the unification of opposites, or the smashing of two apart things together to build something greater. This is the crux of a lot of alchemy, a lot of ritual. It is these unifying forces. That's why when you look at neo-pagan traditions, you will often see people say that they have both a matron and a patron deity, a mother deity and a father deity. They're not literally always taking on those roles, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. They come together to sort of form something beyond them. If you look at Taoism, this is the yin and the yang principles, right? That is the masculine and the feminine, with yin being feminine and yang being masculine respectively, right? This idea is very important, and these two things need each other. The divine masculine and divine feminine do not exist separately, and religions that sort of ignore one side of this equation end up creating a lot of problems. There's a reason why Protestant Christianity produced so many people who ended up leaving it and becoming pagans later on, because Protestant Christianity neglects the divine feminine entirely. This is less of a problem in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, but generally that is one of the big critiques we have of Christianity, because it does orient so heavily around the divine masculine, especially if we're talking about Protestantism, where the divine feminine has been essentially erased and removed from the equation. But then you look at the other side of things, I think specifically of like a Dianic cults. A lot of cults around the goddess Diana go to the other extreme, where they only recognize the divine feminine and they ignore the divine masculine, which creates the same imbalance, creating the same problem. The masculine and the feminine, they need each other, and for them to work ritualistically, they must come together. They exist on a polarity, and then they smash together to make something beyond them and something greater. So that is essentially a formulation of love. So this video has a sponsor. Thank you so much to John Zaremba, the author of a short story collection that has been released. I read it and I thought it was really, really beautiful, called XLZABK001. I'll put that in the description box. I don't expect anyone to remember that, but it's all linked below. It's a collection of 7 short stories that explore all sorts of like really integral themes. Specifically, it explores the dark divine masculine and the idea of divine masculinity in a way that I find really interesting. I feel like that's neglected a lot in fiction, and I really appreciate that there's people making art related to that subject. It also explores Stoicism, which of course I assume you guys are familiar with Stoicism. Stoicism has kind of become a buzzword, but I feel like when you explore it through narrative, it really comes to life. So you guys should definitely check out the book. It's all linked below. I really enjoyed it. All right, back to the video. As I mentioned at the start of the video, when I was deeply involved in Thelema, they taught us about this idea of agape, which essentially means the relationship between how we love the gods and the gods love us. It comes from the Greek system of naming different types of love with different terms. You see this in other languages as well, but fundamentally, our relationship with the gods, if you are a more devotional polytheist, should have love involved to some extent. I know a lot of people have complicated relations with the gods, and I think a lot of this stems from really a term thing. I think in the pagan sphere, we use the word working with X or Y deity a lot. And I think a lot of people hear that term and they think of things in like this weirdly transactional view that I find incredibly toxic and useless and damaging. Because when you think of things as a working relationship, like a coworker, you're really not thinking about the gods in a way that the gods should be thought about, because the gods are more powerful than us. I hate to break this to you guys, but spirituality is hierarchical, right? It is not everything on the equal playing field. Not everything is as powerful as us. I know some left-hand path antinomian types will tell you otherwise, but that is simply not true. And so if you are someone who is a polytheist, who wants to honor the gods and connect to the gods and gain gnosis from the gods, love is useful. Love also commands respect, because when you respect a deity, you understand they are higher than you. You have this level of reverence, this level of understanding that they are more than you and could theoretically like smite you, I guess. Not likely to happen, but you know what I mean. And that love sort of builds from that. That love builds from that reverence, that respect, that great relationship there. Because when we talk about our relationships as spirits, I like the word relationship, because it is a back and forth. It is a relation between each other. Think about the word agape, right? It's that back and forth, that back and forth, that back and forth, that back and forth. And so through love, we're able to relate to these spirits in a way that allow us to understand these mysteries. And now I want to talk about initiation. Initiation is a term that is thrown around a lot in esoteric spaces, right? We always talk about initiating. Oh, I'm initiating into this tradition. I'm initiating into this degree. I'm initiating into do X, Y, or Z, right? But what initiation is the beginning of something new. It is sort of being born again, born into some new system, born into some new part of your practice. And often initiatory sequences follow the cycle of life, death, rebirth, and what happens after death. That's incredibly common, but there are other ways of following it. And when we think about initiations throughout our life and initiations that we experience, because there are multiple ways to initiate into something, there are, of course, big group rituals that everyone thinks of when they think of initiation, but there also is, dream initiation. There's initiation where you do a ritual and you sort of get initiated whether you want to or not, right? And love is an initiatory force. I'd like to think about how love operates as an initiatory force in the male life and the female life a little bit differently, because it tends to go in a slightly different way, right? When we think about the life cycle of a woman within a spiritual context, we are thinking of the mother, maiden, crone cycle, right? You start as a maiden, an unmarried person, young, sort of filling that Diana archetype, right? And then as you discover love, you have marriage and you have children, right? And then you become the mother part of this cycle. You are, when the moon is full, when things are sort of generative, you are the creative force, the one that brings life through the portal into this reality, right? And at that point, you have gone through a love-based initiation to get to that point. And then as you get older and you have grandchildren and your children grow up and you enter that next phase, the crone, the wise woman, the Hecate, the new moon, that type of part of the sequence. And that is, once again, a love-based initiation. So it does follow our natural lives, because I think in modern culture, we think of the material and the magical as fully separate in a way that I don't know is true. Even systems that sort of argue that the material world is evil, right? Let's think about ones that really hard believe this, right? Gnosticism, you can even argue Islam falls in this category as well, right? That argue that this material world is evil, everything of this material world is evil. The things we do in the material world still do impact us spiritually, and they still do have important effects. These anti-material traditions will still emphasize things like having relationships, developing a life, being modest, or doing asceticism, even the belief that asceticism is necessary, or if you're some tradition that believes you should be chaste forever and never fall in love and devote yourself to religion only, that still is arguing that love and our relationships have a great impact on the spiritual life. So keep all that in mind, right? It all goes together. Even the detachment from love and the rejection of love with other human beings is still a spiritual state of being. That is why we have this idea that we see it in priests, we see it in the Vestal Virgins, we see it again and again and again of someone who truly decides to withdraw from that part of life, right? It still is spiritually impacting. The material and the magical, they intermix with each other. They are not separate. The key of all esoteric mysteries boils down to this very simple sentence that I was once told by somebody. There is no separation. When you understand that there is no separation between things, everything starts to make a bit more sense. It's a very simple statement, but it's fundamentally true. Now let's look at the male spiritual growth cycle, right? The male spiritual growth cycle is different because the man, it goes through different archetypes than the woman's archetypes are, right? We go through different processes. Our development is different, yet they still parallel, right? It is still life, death, rebirth. Everything is life, death, rebirth. Now, when we talk about love as an initiation within men, I think to this concept that I have made a lot of fun of, but is kind of relevant. God, I'm gonna say it. The Scarlet Woman, whatever you're gonna call it, right? Let's talk about it. So, fundamentally, there is a concept in a number of mystery traditions that in the man's initiatory cycle, he will meet a woman who opens initiatory doors for her, who are sort of gates to that abyss that they cross, and then when they cross this abyss, they develop into a more fully fleshed person. They have that sink or swim moment, that, final experience, that big test of the soul. Female initiatory process throws men through this cycle that tests the soul, tests the psyche, and then through this they become a more developed person or they sink, and not great. That is also a initiation that revolves around love, as well as when men develop in their lives and get married and have children, and that affects them spiritually as well. This affects both sides of this equation. Love is an initiatory force, whether you like it or not, and whether you are spiritual or not. We experience spiritual things whether or not you consider yourself religious or esoteric, right? There is no separation from this. There is no avoiding spirituality. You can ignore it and pretend it does not exist, but that does not make it cease to exist. That's not how things work. And that would be the thing that I think everyone is here for. How do we use magic to develop our relationships, and how does our magical practice directly impact our personal relationships? Now, if you are one of our dear friends from X who is watching this video, I am not going to tell you how to get a succubus GF. Please don't do that. I'm not going there. Please just go outside. Get some help. But I will say that there are certain magical processes you can use to sort of help your relationships grow. I believe that trying to do some sort of ritual to force someone to fall in love with you, a specific targeted person, is fundamentally ethically wrong. I think that is a violation of consent and is generally a really creepy thing to do, and I don't think that's okay. Those practices do exist. If you look at the Greek magical papyri, the one text we have left over from antiquity, that text is littered with these practices. I mean, the PGM, we love it. It's beautiful. It syncretizes Egyptian practices, Mediterranean practices, and Greek practices all together into this beautiful medley of esotericism that we all pull from today, and has led to some of the most infamous rituals that we all know and love. Looking at you, the Bornless ritual. The Bornless ritual would not exist without the PGM's infamous headless ritual, but there are a lot of love spells in there. To deny that humans use magic to get love throughout human history is ridiculous. Some of our oldest records of religious practices are about this, right? I think the better way to approach this is to simply kind of manifest the type of person that you want, right? Make a list of traits that you find appealing, and then call up, say, a fertility spirit and express this. Or when you are praying, if you are a more mysticism bent person, ask to bring someone virtuous in your life who develops you spiritually. Because the hard truth is, who you are dating, who you are married to, who you are engaged to, is going to spiritually impact you, right? I think we all know what a toxic relationship can do to our mind. And the mind, the body, and the spirit are intrinsically linked. If you are in a relationship that is detrimental to you, it is going to affect your spiritual practice very negatively. And so I think it can be great to use spiritual processes to get someone who will benefit you. I do not believe whoever you're with needs to be exactly like you or agree with you on everything. But I think it can be good to have someone who helps you grow and who, doesn't try to destroy your practice or something, right? You want someone who is spiritually healthy for you. Almost every religion teaches this. Everyone understands this, and it's something that is really, really valuable. Now, I think a concept that comes up a lot when we talk about love and magic is this concept kind of makes me want to rip my eyes out, the twin flame. If you have hung out with New Agers, you have heard the twin flame term. I do not like the term twin flame at all, mostly because when New Agers talk about the twin flame, they often talk about a lot of really toxic and unhealthy relationship patterns. The twin flame is often described as someone who is your sort of match. They are your opposite, and you are flames that come together. And this often relates in a very toxic, tumultuous relationship. If you read any article on it, this is a theme. I don't think that is a spiritually conductive relationship. I think that, when we talk about spiritual matches, I do believe, as I am a determinist, I believe fate is real, which is a belief that a lot of ancient pagans held as well. is that we are sort of meant to be with certain people, right? Our fate is sort of tied together with the strings of fate themselves, and there are specific people who we are meant to be with, right? That is a beautiful concept and one that's pretty ancient, but I think we should divorce it from modern twin flame ideas, right? I think the secular term soulmate is actually a better concept of that. Because there are people who are our match. And when we think about someone who's our match, once again, we need to remember relationships are about polarity, right? You want someone who is the other side of that polarity so you can come together and create equilibrium. Now, once you are in love, there are many ways to spiritually help grow that relationship and make it even stronger, right? Love does not end when things begin. As I said, love is an initiation. When we think about initiations come in sequences, right? You don't take one initiation and they're done. A spiritual practice does not begin when you do one thing and then you're enlightened. That's not how it works. It's an endless progress. We're sort of always walking to get closer and closer and closer. I fundamentally believe that humans cannot grasp the fullness of divinity. I don't think we are capable of it. I think it is beyond our comprehension. I think of the story of the Book of Enoch, which is biblical apocrypha, where essentially there was this man who he learned everything about it is, and this angel told him everything. And then the angel took him from this world. I've had a long argument with my friends about whether this means he was just ascended to heaven or he died from too much knowledge. Argue that in the comments. How do you guys interpret the Book of Enoch? I actually got on a huge phone call argument with this with the Chris from Amateur Magus and I. We had a whole debate about this. But fundamentally, we don't know everything. And so we are always going through initiations. As you go through your relationship and time passes, there are things happening. You can absolutely use like magical practices to make your relationship stronger. There are ways to keep it going forward and understand the spiritual dimensions of everything that is always happening, right? I just think we need to always bridge these things together. Now, a word of caution about love-related spiritual practices. I think that if you respect and love your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, right? I don't think it's okay to just do like spells on them or rituals on them if they're doing something you don't like. I think that's incredibly ethically wrong. I would never do that. You should never do that. If you both agree on doing something, that's a little bit of a different conversation, but I think fundamentally you should be praying to or doing rituals to better yourself, right? This is gonna make me sound ooh, love and light, and some of you guys are gonna shit on me for it, but fundamentally I think if you wanna make your relationships better through magic, you want to make yourself better. Do things to make you a better partner, to understand your femininity or masculinity better, or to communicate better. Don't actually do things to someone you love without telling them. That is messed up. A lot of people historically did that, and there are, like in grimoires, ways to do that. I don't think that's okay. I just think that's a big act of disrespect. So I wouldn't do that. I think in general, like, if you were to tell someone you did something and they would be upset about it, you probably shouldn't do it. Like, just don't. So love is important, and love is everything. Love flows through everything. This endless relationship, this agape, is absolutely intertwined intrinsically with the mysteries. So this has been Georgina Rose. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. If you want to support me, I am supported through Patreon. Join my Patreon, you get extra videos every month, all the videos early, my ritual guides, and you can get private spiritual consultations with me one-on-one on the phone. So I can give you all your spiritual advice you need, help you come up with rituals for your situation, help you grow, give you recommendations on what to look into. It's really fun and a good time. And I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Telegram, TikTok. I'm everywhere. I'm on Substack too. I'm on every platform under the sun. You can also donate directly through Ko-Fi or Venmo. That's all. It's all linked below. And thank you so much for our sponsor. I will be putting that book information all in the description so you can check it out and support him. It's really cool to see, you know, small creatives creating work. So definitely do that. I also host the podcast, Postmodern Iconoclast, which is available on all podcasting platforms, excluding Apple Podcasts, because Apple Podcasts does not like me and would actually not let me list the podcast. So that kind of sucks. But I'm also on, you know, YouTube here. You can just listen to it on this channel. That helps me out a lot. I would actually prefer if you listen to it on this channel, but you can do it wherever you want. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. And like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you're subscribed for 93 days, you're your holy guardian angel, and you'll never need to know what love is.